Hey, you action figure enthusiasts out there, JC here, and for my final video of 2022, I have come up with a list of the top 5 favorite action figure lines that I've collected this year, and then with that, I've broken it down for each line, my top 5 favorite figures for the year. So keep in mind, these are just my favorites. I'm not sitting here telling you these are the absolute best figures that were produced by every single company out there in 2022. I have not handled every single action figure, but these are the ones that appealed to me the most. And, especially in this day and age with rising action figure costs, I personally have become much more selective in what I buy. So like, I don't buy every single Marvel Legend figure. So the first thing with this list to note is these figures were appealing enough to me. They appealed to me personally enough that I actually went out and bought them. And then from the ones I bought, I've chosen, my 5 favorites from each of these lines. But again, I'm not sitting here telling you that these are the best figures that have actually been produced. I mean, everybody's got their own opinions about that. And a lot of times it's not even necessarily about the figure itself. It's more about like the character it's based on or what. But again, today I'm going to share with you my favorites for the year. And also I have a few honorable mentions. And one other thing I want to note, if you caught my live stream earlier this week and I went over my list, I've actually changed it a bit from that as I thought about it more. So just know that it's going to differ a little bit than what I said on Thursday. But let's jump into it, and let's start off first with the honorable mentions for 2022. Now, for the first honorable mention is the McFarlane Toys 7-inch Spawn line. Now, this is one that I debated to include in the top 5 and kind of went back and forth on. In fact, on Thursday during the live stream, I think I had said that this was my number 5 pick. But Spawn, probably the reason why I'm not putting this in the top 5 is because Spawn just personally has never been that favorite of a character of mine. But that being said, McFarlane has really kind of brought me on board with Spawn, even though I wasn't like hugely into the character before they started doing these figures. So that kind of right there shows you how kind of impressed I've been with the Spawn figures. Probably the reason why I was never really into Spawn back in the day is just because, those early Spawn figures had very little articulation and stuff. So that's definitely improved the detailing and everything. So didn't quite make the cut for top 5, but definitely worth mentioning that I feel like McFarlane's been doing some pretty cool stuff with the Spawn figures this year. My second honorable mention here is the Mattel Masters of the Universe Origins line, which again, I really kind of struggled with whether I wanted to include this in my top 5 or not. I definitely have been buying a lot of these figures this year and been really impressed with Mattel and how they've managed to bring Masters of the Universe back in full force with multiple lines at retail. And for me personally, as a kid, I never really collected Masters of the Universe toys. I watched the cartoons, but it wasn't a toy line that I ever really collected or played with as a kid. So definitely, as I became an adult and stuff with the 2000X line and stuff, I got more into Masters. But this line has a lot of nostalgia to it, while I would say, obviously better articulated and better designed than the original toys. These are very much done in the classic look and feel of Masters of the Universe. So didn't quite make my top 5, but definitely worth mentioning as a pretty cool action figure line, especially I feel like if you're into Masters and such. My next honorable mention is from Hasbro. It is the Transformers, which I'm kind of mixing up 2 different lines for this with the Legacy and then also the Studio Series based on the animated movie. And technically they're part of 2 different lines, but they're essentially, they all go together. So I've been enjoying these figures, looking forward to completing Motormaster here with the Stunticons soon, and again, not making the top 5, but definitely worth getting an honorable mention here. And then for my final honorable mention, it's not actually an action figure line, but it is a specific figure. So I have definitely found myself buying less and less of the NECA Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff from the animated series. Not necessarily because I think the quality or anything's gone down. It's just that as they've gotten into the more obscure characters, I've just been less interested in wanting to spend the money on them. But one figure that particularly stood out to me was the Usagi Yojimbo figure that they did this year. This is a top-notch figure. If I was doing best figure of the year, this would definitely be a top contender for that. And if you're a fan of Turtles or Usagi himself, this is one that I feel like people would definitely want to pick up. So again, not necessarily putting the Turtles as an honorable mention in general, but this particular figure from NECA is definitely, I felt like, was top notch for this year. Okay, so those were my honorable mentions for 2022. Any of them could have easily made it into the top 5. In fact, at one point or another, I had them there in the top 5, but then just as I thought about it more and kind of broke it down into individual figures, I ended up, moving them out. But easily those could have made the top 5. But now let's get into the nitty gritty of my top 5 favorite action figure lines for 2022. And then, as I said, I've broken each line down with my top 5 favorite figures. One thing to note here, however, is I did not break it down like with Marvel Legends per se. I didn't break it down in, between deluxe figures, Build-A-Figures, HasLabs, MCU, what have you. These are just overall my top 5 favorite figures that the company put out for each one of these action figure lines. All right, so let's start off with number 5. So at the end of the day, number 5 ended up being the Super 7 ThunderCats Ultimates line. So first of all, even though we had to wait quite a while for most of these figures, I think Super 7 did a pretty solid job. The only figure that they released this year that I had some issues with was the Tigra figure, which, I definitely was looking forward to, but because of the quality control issues with that one, that's why you don't see him here in the top 5. But despite that, I felt like Super 7 did provide us with some really cool Thundercat figures, and in fact, is really the first company in the modern era of action figures to bring us the entire team of both Thundercats and Mutants. So that right there is probably the big reason why I have this line now in my top 5, which is the biggest difference from the top 5 I talked about on Thursday during the live stream. So let's break it down. These are my top 5 favorite figures for 2022, but we'll go from 5 to 1, my favorite of the bunch. And number 5 is Cheetara, which we finally got after a couple of delays. But again, credit to Super 7, I had always wanted Cheetara for, back starting with when Bandai America started doing ThunderCats, and then again Mattel, and she just never seemed to materialize. Now, ThunderCats is another action figure line that I really didn't collect as a kid. I again watched the cartoon, but I never bought any of the toys. So this is really the first time that I've been able to actually complete a team of ThunderCats, and again the mutants, the main team of mutants to go along with them. Number 4 is Vulture Man, which I think is probably my favorite character of the mutants. I always liked the way he talked in the cartoon, and so I was very happy when Super 7 gave us this guy in action figure form. Number 3 is Mumra, the Ever Living. So, back when Mattel started doing this line, we got the old decrepit form of Mumra, but this is really the version that I had wanted. And I thought Super 7 did a pretty good job with it, and was nice that they actually threw in Mummut. Unlike with Snarf, where they're going to make us buy them separately for $55. That's definitely not something I was particularly thrilled with. But again, Mumra is definitely a cool figure. Number 2 is Monkeyan, which is another one of my favorite mutants, and I thought Super 7 did a really nice job with it. In fact, the reason why this is number 2 and not Vulture Man is I feel like this figure was a little bit more detailed. So definitely was impressed with this one and glad to add him to my collection. And then finally, the number 1 Thundercat figure for 2022 is Slythe, which I felt that Super 7 just did knock this one out of the park. It's got a really nice weight to it. The detail on it is really good. And even though Slythe is not my favorite mutant, I definitely feel like this was the best Thundercat figure that they put out in the year. So overall solid performance from Super 7. If you're a Thundercat fan, you definitely got some pretty cool figures this year. So coming in at number 4 for my favorite action figure line of the year is the McFarlane Toy DC Multiverse line, which I think has made vast improvements this year. We're seeing a wider variety of characters from McFarlane finally, beyond just Batman. And then things like with their movie figures, I think the likenesses are starting to get more dead on and such as well. I personally still probably prefer Marvel Legends over DC Multiverse, just because I do think the articulation is a little bit better on Marvel Legend figures, and I do like that you get more accessories in general. But again, I think McFarlane Toys is doing a great job with this line, and look forward to seeing what they do for next year as well. Now, as far as breaking these figures, these are my top 5 favorite figures for 2022 for this line. But breaking them down, starting with number 5, is the Black Adam movie figure, the one with the hood, the cloak and the hood. So it was a little annoying that, they released 3 different versions of this guy, and if you want him without the hood, you had to get a second figure. So that took a little bit away from this figure, but really what made this one stand out to me, in fact, all 3 of the Black Adam movie figures that they did, was just getting the likeness of The Rock. Again, that's something that McFarlane had seemed to really struggle with, getting the likenesses of real life people in their action figures, but definitely seeing some vast improvements in regards to that. And then this figure's just got a whole lot of detailing and everything, so I felt like it was really cool. So I had to choose out of the 3. This is the one I ended up going with, the one with the hood. And this is my number 5 figure of the line for 2022. And then coming in at number 4 is Shazam. Now this is the gold label comic book version of Shazam. There is a movie Shazam figure coming, which is actually already out, but I have not yet gotten my hands on that one. From the promo images and stuff, that one looks pretty good again with the likeness. But I also really like this comic book version of Shazam that we got. It was a pain in the butt to get because it was a Walmart exclusive. I don't like seeing McFarlane doing so many store exclusives here recently in this line, but I guess that's just par for the course. But if you're able to find this one, I definitely feel like it's a pretty cool figure. Coming in at number 3, technically not a DC Multiverse figure. This figure is actually part of their DC Page Punchers line, but essentially it is a DC Multiverse figure, so I'm including it here. And this is the John Constantine figure that they did, which I think, they did a fantastic job with. The overall detailing on it's nice. You actually get some decent accessories with this figure, which is something that often McFarlane is lacking. But, especially if you're a fan of the character Constantine, this is one that I think you definitely need to add to your collection. And again, technically not DC Multiverse, but we're going to throw it in this list nevertheless. Coming in at number 2 is a Mega Fig. This is the Clayface figure, which I think McFarlane Toys did a really good job on. Definitely one of the highlights of this line are most of their Mega figures, and I love the little faces and everything they sculpted on the skin. I've had quite a few different Clayface figures from Mattel DC Collectibles, and those are all really good figures, but again, I thought McFarlane did a really nice job with this one. You've got the articulated jaw and everything, so this is my second favorite figure in the line for the year. And then my number 1 DC Multiverse figure for 2022 is another Mega figure. This is the Bane figure. So this is the second time that they did Bane in this line, but I feel like this is a far superior figure than the first one that they did. This one is much more in keeping with his original look. The detailing on it, the size of it, everything is just really top notch to me. So this is my number 1 figure for DC Multiverse in 2022. So moving on to my number 3 action figure line for 2022, it is Mattel's Masters of the Universe Masterverse line. Unlike Origins, which just barely missed the cut, This is a line that has definitely impressed me quite a bit, especially this year. And I even kind of go against the grain in saying I like this line better than Masters of the Universe Classics. If for no other reason, then it is just much easier to collect this line than Classics ever was. So these are the top 5 figures, my favorite figures of the line this year. Starting with number 5 is the Frosta figure. So this is actually a very new addition to my line. I just got this one the other day, but I've really been impressed with it. This is actually the first time I've ever owned an action figure based on this character. She's got the hair color changeability, which I think is kind of cool, but I just felt like they did a really good job with it. So Frosta is number 5. Coming in at number 4 is the new Masterverse Sunman figure, and the thing I really like the most about this figure are the wings. They stay attached to the figure. They have some articulation to them. I like the semi-translucent plastic that they used for them. So much better than the strange collar thing that the Origins version wears, which I know is in keeping with the original figure. But Sunman here is my 4th favorite figure in the line. Coming in at number 3 is She-Ra. Now this was released as a deluxe figure, and I have had multiple She-Ra figures before, and this is actually probably my favorite of all of them, including Classics. I thought they did a really good job. You get some nice accessories. So, definitely She-Ra is in my top 5, and she comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, you'd almost think this would be number 1, but I'm putting him at 2. It's the 40th anniversary He-Man figure. Much better than the Revelations He-Man, I gotta say, and I like it even better than the classic version of He-Man. So definitely He-Man here is a strong candidate for the line, and again coming in at number 2 for me in 2022. And finally, for number 1, my favorite figure in the Masterverse line in 2022 is the Hordak figure. This is another deluxe figure, so you got some cool accessories. I love the arm. I have not had any issues with my arm falling off. I know some people have with their figure, but I have not had that issue, and I just love the overall look of it. I love the colors on it. So even though the He-Man, the 40th anniversary He-Man figure was a great figure, and you'd think He-Man would be number 1, I'm going with Hordak, which is one of my favorite characters. Alright, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty, moving into my second favorite action figure line for 2022, which is the Hasbro Marvel Legends line. Now, one thing you may note here is that there are no Spider-Man figures in my top 5 list. And you also may note that you're only seeing 4 figures here at the moment, so I'll get to that 5th figure in just a sec. But I'm sure there's some Spider-Man figures that are deserving to be in the top 5, and I'm sure you'll see plenty of other people's lists that have Spider-Man in it. I personally am just kind of Spider-Man out, and I have not been buying a lot of the Spider-Man figures for the Marvel Legend line. I was pretty happy with the ones I already had, so that's why you don't see Spider-Man here. But these are my top 5 favorites, starting with number 5. Is the MCU Disney Plus She-Hulk figure. So the show itself definitely wouldn't make it into any of my top 5 lists, but I felt like Hasbro did a really top-notch job with this figure. Now, honestly, it was a toss-up between the MCU She-Hulk and the MCU Moon Knight, but Moon Knight is definitely a cool figure, but I really thought that Hasbro knocked it out of the park. Fact is I think the figure looks better than the character actually appeared in the show. So I realize my number 4 here might be a little controversial, being that it's essentially just a repaint figure, and some might argue even a bit overpriced repaint. But when it comes down to it, I just really like this figure. I like the brighter colors on it over the original figure that Hasbro released. I like the video game feel to it. I would definitely like to see Hasbro do more, Marvel versus Capcom type figures. The proton cannon is a nice extra touch. So, again, I realize it is just a repaint, but I really feel like this is a far better version of this figure than the first one that they gave us. Okay, and then my number 3 figure, and the reason why you didn't see it in the group image is because it is the HasLab Galactus, and I didn't feel like trying to move it it would be too big of a pain to move it over to the table with the other figures. But definitely a very cool figure. It's too bad that we're not going to be getting another Marvel Legend HasLab in 2023, meaning an actual item shipping to us. I'm sure Hasbro will try again, but obviously this year's HasLab failed. But Galactus was a great figure, just as the Sentinel the year before was. And so number 3 is Galactus. Coming in at number 2 is the new U.S. Agent figure, and if you've followed my channel for any period of time, you know this is one of my favorite characters. This is probably the figure I was most looking forward to in 2022, and I think Hasbro did a solid job with it. I know this one probably isn't making a lot of people's top 5 or 10 lists, but again, he's just such a favorite character of mine that he definitely is in there and almost made it to number 1. But number 1 this year goes to another favorite character of mine, the 20th anniversary Captain America figure. So I love this figure. I love the texturing on the armor. I love the brighter colors on this figure. You know, they did a similar figure as a Walmart exclusive before, but I feel like this one is even better. The only minor downside is the holes in the shield, but that really doesn't bother me too much. I've got plenty of cap shields. So my number 1 favorite figure of the year is, again, Captain America. And then finally, my number 1 favorite action figure line for 2022, which again, if you followed my channel for any period of time, should be no surprise to you. It is Hasbro's GIJoe classified line. So I really feel like Hasbro has been killing it with GIJoe this year. The figures have become much easier to get your hands on, at least if you're willing to purchase them online. And we've gotten a great selection of characters throughout the year as well. So coming in at number 5 is the new Serpentor figure with Air Chariot. This probably would have come in higher on the list, but it was an exclusive, so it was a little bit harder to get than others. And then my one issue with the figure is just that the elbows don't bend as well on him. But still, overall, a very cool figure, worthy of the top 5. And for me personally, he's coming in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is GIJoe team member Spirit, along with Freedom. So this is a great figure. Hasbro outdid themselves with Spirit here. I can't say the original Spirit figure was a favorite of mine, but this one, the detailing, the accessories, I love what they did with Spirit, or Freedom, I should say, with the wings, the alternate wings that you can make it look like he's flying or just sitting there on his shoulder. So again, great figure, and again, coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, probably my favorite Cobra infantryman, the Cobra Crimson Guard. I've always liked these guys. I've always liked the red outfits. So I think Hasbro did a great job with this one. So again, coming in at number 3 is the Crimson Guard. Then coming in at number 2 is the Sergeant Slaughter figure. This is probably the best GIJoe team member figure that they've done this year. The overall detailing, they captured the likeness of the Sarge, especially from the cartoon. The accessories are cool. So again, coming in at number 2 is Sergeant Slaughter. And then finally, number 1, and I guess you could actually count this as my favorite figure of the year as well, since it's number 1 in my favorite action figure line for the year. It is the GIJoe Classified Classic Storm Shadow figure. So this is the version of Storm Shadow all of us, I think, were waiting for. I love how they did the accessories, very much in keeping with the original figure, being able to pretty much put everything on his backpack. So the detailing is nice, the paint applications are nice, and it's really hard to imagine them doing a better job with this one. So Storm Shadow is my favorite GIJoe classified figure for 2022, and again, pretty safe to say my favorite figure overall for 2022 as well. Okay, so that's it. Those are my top 5 action figure lines, my favorite action figure lines for 2022, and then for each one of those, my top 5 favorite figures, plus some honorable mentions. Now, I'd love to hear your own thoughts. What were your favorite figures this year? Let me know down in the comments section below. Like this video if you're so inclined, and please think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. I hope you guys all have a great New Year's this weekend, a safe New Year's, and looking forward to talking more action figures with you guys in 2023. And until next time, I'll catch you later. Hey, thanks for watching today's video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification so alerted every time I upload a new video. And be sure to head over to the Toy News International and Marvelous News message boards communities. It's a great place to talk toys and win cool contests like $100 store credits to Big Bad Toy Store. And remember, action figures are great.